Composing Gloves here, and this is another video where you guys are combined MIDI music theory and music theory from the ground up. I'm going to be doing a lot of talking out loud. I don't feel like sheet music would aid in what I'm going to say very much, because if you understood the circular chord progression, which you must understand that one if you really want to get this one and use it to its fullest extent. So what am I going to be doing in this video? Well, we're going to be talking about borrowed chords. Borrowed chords are a really simple idea. Borrowed chords are simply when you borrow chords from another key, typically the relative minor if you modulate over that direction, or you modulate over or the parallel minor. So okay, let's take a look at this. So if I'm playing in C major, I would use the C major scale, right? Let me use a piano for this one because I don't know. All right, so we're gonna use that, right? Now, what is the relative minor? Well, that'd be the C minor scale. That is the natural minor scale. That's the one. This is the parallel minor scale. That's the one I'm going to be using. So what does this mean? Well, if we look at the diatonic chords in the C major scale, it's all white keys and you just, make the triads up. Same thing goes for the minor scale. Now, it should be noted that this also is the relative minor to, what is it, E flat? It's E flat. And so we have options to sort of move between these keys. Now, I'm not going to go like crazy and go into E flat in this video. It's like, ba-da-da. So what we're going to be looking at is using these. Now, there's a video floating around that I think is a great video. It's I learned a lot from him. He teaches piano and improvisation, and he talks about chord families. And I can't remember the name. I want to say it's this one YouTuber, but I'm not sure it's him, so I'm not going to say it. But he's phenomenal at playing piano and doing all these things. He named them as chord families, and then in it he says he's not sure why they work. Well, I can tell you why they work. They're just borrowed chords. So that's all they are. They're borrowed chords. And what he did was, you go in C major. So here we can use C major. We can use F major. We can use G major. We can use A minor. F, F, D minor. So one of the other cool things though is in C minor, you have C minor, you have E flat minor, or major, my bad, major, G minor, you have A flat major. What does this mean? Well, I don't have a full keyboard, so I can't do like the coolest thing in the world. But if I play like a C, I can modulate between these. So instead of playing, like 1, 6, 5, 4, 1. That's like cool and all, but I could get, dark, shift around, be an interesting sort of deal. So here I could go 1, minor 5. We could go to up. We could do a chromatic step up from the minor 5 to the A flat major. And then, whoops, that was probably a little loud. And then to the 4. And the key that we're in, so that'd be the major key and then back to the 1. So in context, so hey, that's a cool chord progression. That's a unique chord progression. So we're taking things and we're looking at it from the perspective of the major scale. We're borrowing from the minor scale. If we were moving around in the minor scale, then we'd be borrowing the other direction. So that's a pretty simple trick that's up your sleeve. And you can do this for anything. If you've got, we could shift into the relative minor. Now, generally, borrowed chords come from the parallel. Like you shift over to that key and then you start borrowing from neighboring scales. There are ways of sort of jumping around and grabbing chords from other keys that are like weird, generally through chromatic movements though. And there are ways to, there was one other thing I wanted to say about this jazz, but it just left my brain. So I'm going to leave it alone. So yeah, so we got C. Now we also have B flat major in this key, which I remember I was going to say pivot chords. So this is in a video about pivot chords, but pivot chords are a chord that you pivot on that share sort of a tenuous relationship with one scale and another scale. And they're called pivot chords because they're used to pivot into another key. Boom, you're like in another key. Typically, the one that people usually learn first is the 7 chord. So because it pulls to the 4. So if I play like C7, so the dominant 7, that pulls to the 4, which would be the F. And now I can move around in the, I can move around in the F scale F major, and I could do a pivot chord here. And that pulls to B flat because it pulls to the 4. Why does it pull to the 4? Well, let's look at this. So we have C, E, G, B flat. B flat is the key signature. We added the flat in that exists in the key of F. And the E will resolve up a half step, which sounds quite nice. And the G, will resolve up to an A, which is a whole step, which sounds an awful lot like the resolution that kind of happens when you go from a 5 to a 1, given the inversions are there. So it has this, oh man, what are those tones called? I can't remember what they're called. There's a name for tones when they do that though. And that relationship is what allows your ear to sort of accept and embrace and hug this new scale. So I guess I did cover pivot chords a little bit. But anyways, that's the idea of borrowed chords. Now there's all sorts of chord progressions. I'll probably do videos on them occasionally about like, hey, this is a chord progression thing. But now you've been given the tools to understand it. And you combine this with your knowledge of the circular chord progressions, and you can start creating some pretty darn cool chord progressions. If you have any questions about this, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day. Talking about the major 7 chord. We've officially gotten to the point where we will now have a third inversion option available to ourselves because we have 4 notes in our chord. So I could try and cover all the 7s going real fast, but there's a whole bunch of additional combinations that come along with adding a 7. And I feel like just